Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. You have found us here at 3 p.m. ET on Tuesday. As always, it is crime time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15, going on 16 novels of suspense. My current book is called One Wrong Word, and it is out right now and just went into a second printing. So I thank you so much for that. We are not here to talk about my book today, unless you want to, if you want to. But today I'd prefer to talk about this absolutely thought-provoking, unique, incredible, brilliant, wonderful, riveting, propulsive, surprising, twisty, unbelievably good book called The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. And he is here with us today from the UK. It comes out next week, which is amazing. It is already getting so incredibly much buzz. It's sort of a utopian, dystopian crime novel, sort of Agatha Christie in a locked room meeting science fiction on an island, but not exactly like that. There is just absolutely no way to describe it, but whatever you call it, The Last Murder at the End of the World is touching and imaginative and thought-provoking and unique. It has stayed with me ever since I read it. I cannot get this out of my head, and I don't think you'll want to get it out of your head either. So I'm so sorry to gush, Stuart, but this is a marvelous book. And on behalf of all interviewers, let me thank you, and that's being sarcastic, for giving us a novel that we absolutely cannot talk about. There's no way. We'll try. But in the bottom line, it is a really good story. As I welcome you here this afternoon, what do you think makes a good story? What does that mean to you?
That is, what a brilliant question to open with. What is a good story? For me, when I set out to write these things, I just don't want to waste your time. I don't want you to get to the end of a book and feel like that was a complete waste of however many hours I've spent with it. Even if you don't like the book and you don't like my books, hopefully you don't get to the end of them and think, I'd rather I didn't do that. I'd rather I didn't spend that time with that guy, with those words in that world. I never want that to be the case. So for me, I want it to be fun. Every page should be fun. Every page should be entertaining. That's all I'm here to do. There's loads of other stuff peppered through, but I want you to have a good time. I want you to pick the book up at like 10 o'clock in the morning, think you're going to read 2 pages and still be there at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's my dream when I write a book. That's absolutely what I want. And that for me is a good story. It's the book that you can't put down, the book that didn't waste your time, the book you just want to immediately push on other people and say, hey, read that because I need someone to talk to about this.
And that's what I'm saying to all of you about The Last Murder at the End of the World. I cannot wait to talk to you more about this. I mean, it's interesting because that's what happened to me. There's no question about it. I just, it's like when you're a little kid and someone puts you on their lap and says, once upon a time, and then they tell you this tale and you just can't wait to hear what happens next. So that's top of mind for you when you're writing.
Yeah, I want to transport you. I want you to forget where you are. I want you to, when you look up from the book after however many hours, I sort of want you to blink because you've sort of forgotten that you were in a chair in your apartment, wherever you are. Like, I love that idea that a book it's one of the best ways of doing it, I think. It's something that can completely take you to another place. It can completely surround you. It can completely envelop you. You can believe these people you're reading about are real for a moment. Your imagination does that. It makes that bridge. So for me, when I write books, that's if a moment starts to feel, not even authentic's not the right word. If you can start to see that there's an author pulling the strings, I feel like I've failed. Like, I want to push back on that. I want this world to feel so alive and lived in and real. And I want it to have details and edges. And I want you to feel like it's rough under your touch, That's what I'm always trying to get to.
It's rough under your touch. That's so interesting. I mean, I do have to tell you that after reading this book, The Last Murder at the End of the World, I kind of looked at our world, and we'll talk more about that, your world, in a minute, but I kind of looked at our world in a different way. I mean, you open a lot of doors and ask a lot of questions and raise a lot of possibilities about what would happen if something, and how things might really be. So I thank you for that adventure, and I thank you for that, and I thank you all for coming this afternoon. Let me just welcome some of you today. Renee Herskowitz is here, and Diane Dick is here, and Randy William Gravitz is here. Shannon Hansen says, putting the book on my TBR right now. Very wise, Shannon Hansen. This is a marvelous book. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so thrilled that you are here today. And wow, you have picked a great day to come to hear about the last murder at the end of the world. If you are a veteran of Crime Time, we welcome you as well. You know that Crime Time was started as a part of A Mighty Blaze 4 years ago now, at the beginning of the pandemic, to keep us together, to keep us as a reading and writing and thoughtful community of people who love books and cannot wait to find a new fantastic book. And perhaps that will be The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton today. Let me just tell you a little bit about Stuart. Stuart Turton is I'm reading this bio that his publicist gave me, and it's hilarious. So I will just, it says, Stuart Turton is your favorite friendly neighborhood author. I should at least read it properly if I'm going to read it. Stuart Turton is your friendly neighborhood author, responsible for The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, The Devil and the Dark Water, and The Last Murder at the End of the World, otherwise known as the Not a Trilogy trilogy. His books have appeared on the Sunday Times and USA Today bestseller lists and are known for fusing locked room mysteries with literary fiction, sci-fi, fantasy, and horror, if you just get that in your head. Stuart's books have been translated into 40 languages and have sold over 1 million copies. And then it says, which would be impressive if every author wasn't boasting about exactly the same thing. First of all, that's not true. Every author is not boasting about the same thing, but nevertheless, congratulations. The Last Murder at the End of the World out in a week from Source Books, who we love. So I promise I'm going to stop talking now. Yes, Robin, the title is intriguing and a mouthful. So perfect. Stuart, I'm going to let you do this because it's risky, but just tell us what this book is about.
Oh, I'd love to. Have we got 4 hours? How long does this thing go on for? So I'll try and do the 2-minute version of it. It's set 90 years after the world ended. So everybody died, which is obviously awful and terrible. But 122 people have survived, and they're living on a small Greek island. And it is a paradise. So this is a utopian dystopia. The world's gone, but what's left of it is beautiful. There are no arguments, there's no fighting, there's no violence of any sort. There are some curiosities on the island. They have a voice in their head that can hear all their thoughts, and it sort of like gently instructs them on what to do every day. Technology's been reset to almost zero. There are places on the island they're not allowed to go to, and there is a curfew. So every night, no matter what they're doing, at 7:30 at night, they just fall asleep. No matter where they are, whatever they're doing, they just fall asleep, and they're woken again in the same fashion at 6:30 in the morning. And there's nothing they can do about either of those things, and they don't wake up in the night. So there's a bunch of mysteries, but otherwise, it's a real lovely world. And then one of their number turns up dead. One of their number has been murdered, and it's up to one of these pure, beautiful, innocent souls to reckon with the idea of murder and then get to the heart of why it could have happened on this island and what caused it.
It's fascinating because as a reader, when we open the book and we see that they automatically go to sleep at 7:30 and they die at a certain time, we can go into that at some point, and they wake up at the certain time and everybody's all happy and lovely, but there are certain places you can't go, and there are certain people who are in charge and certain people who seem to be a little bit different. And readers are saying, this is not good. Nothing good can happen now. And one of the fascinating parts is that the characters, except for one, don't have any of those questions.
No, and I like that idea. I like the idea that it's sort of what we'd give up to live a perfect life, right? What questions wouldn't you ask? I always think about those people who, like, they live next to serial killers, right? But they have a really beautiful house next to a serial killer. So, like, they must hear the clanking around and the bodies going out, but they're like, if I say anything, what happens next? So I like the idea of what we as a species can turn a blind eye to, and how incredibly capable, and history is littered with these examples of terrible things happening next door to people, and people have been like, I don't want to disrupt my nice, pleasant life, so I'm not willing to, get into it. And this is what this entire island's doing. There are strange things happening on this island, and we as readers know they're very strange and that they could be a bit more sinister. But our characters don't want to see that. All apart from Emery, our protagonist, and all she can do is see it. That's all she can. All she can do is ask questions that don't get answers.
One of the wonderful things about this novel, and again, we're talking about The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. One of the things that's one of the parts of the structure of it is that it is a murder mystery. And it does have the tenets of a murder mystery, that there is a crime that needs to be solved by a person who is looking to solve it. And that is Emery. You have sort of created this curious, questioning girl, Emery, who is not quite, has the same mindset as everyone else. And we love her. What was it like to create Emery, and why did you need her? And what role does she play?
Oh, it was a nightmare creating Emery. It was so awful. The problem, as you'll know, Hank, is that when you create a book like this, so I've created a book that has a beautiful, selfless, wonderful cast of nice people. It's incredibly hard to generate drama out of them because obviously, like, selfless, kind, nice people don't really have drama. And you need conflict, and they don't have conflict. So I was looking at this book being like, it felt inert at first. I was like, what do I wring out of this cast? How do I wring something out of these characters if they don't argue? And I realized the nicest, most beautiful people in the world are my family, and we still argue all the damn time. So I was like, oh, well, that works. I can still do that. So I created a family. And then I wanted this questioning character at the center, a character who relentlessly and bluntly asks questions that don't get answers, and yet somehow doesn't really annoy people too much. That they're a bit bothered by her, but they're never sort of ostracizing her. And I started to look around for examples of that. And then I saw my daughter, my 5.5-year-old daughter, wandering around, just asking the bluntest questions of people. People in the street just walking up, asking why they've got purple hair or why they've got like a ring through their nose. Just any question that comes into her mind, she immediately follows through and goes and finds an answer for it. And I was like, I need it to be her. I need Emery to be like that. She needs to have that guilelessness and that beauty and that questioning nature that no one's ever going to take offense to. So actually, Emery sort of modeled on my daughter, but it took me a year or 2 years to work that out of writing. So for 2 years, I was constantly struggling with this character, trying to work out how she fit and how to make her work. And I must have tried 1,000 versions of her before I, worked out that my daughter could help me.
Isn't that so nice? And that's why we have children, right? So they can help you with your novels. I mean, she's lovely because she loves books, and I love that that's her quirk. Mm-hmm. She's one of the few people on the island who cares about books, and that makes her separate. And she refers to Sherlock Holmes, which is so lovely. And she also, as a child, you're not angry when a child asks questions. I mean, they just want to know. I mean, it's not that they have an agenda. She just wants to understand what's going on, and no one else really cares. And that makes us relate to her in a very deep way. I mean, you're talking about the book opens, and I just want to show that, and forgive me, I folded on the corner. Don't yell at me. It's an arc. It opens with 91 hours until humanity's extinction. And you talk about conflict and a ticking clock. You just say at the beginning of the book, tick, 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 this is going to happen. Can you give us a sense of what this Greek Isle is like? We talk about world building all the time, and you've created this marvelous world, which is, it's kind of familiar, but not. How did you come to that place?
It's really interesting because I came to it from a mechanical point of view. So my 3 books so far are all murder mysteries. And thank you for saying that earlier, because I think sometimes when you cross genres, which is what I do, I think sometimes people think that you're not writing the thing that you are. They mistake the baubles for the tree. I'm writing crime novels, and then the baubles are things like fantasy or science fiction or horror sometimes, right? But the main thrust of it and the tropes that follow through are always crime fiction. So when I was writing this, I was keenly aware that that's what I was going to do. I was writing a crime mystery novel. It was going to have, it had needed all the tropes of that. And I always write locked room. So my first novel was a locked house mystery. My second one was a locked boat mystery. And this is a locked island mystery. So I needed something to keep them on the island, because obviously the question becomes, if you murder someone, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just get on a plane and go to Argentina? Why not just go somewhere else? So I started thinking about how I could trap people on this island. How can I stop them from leaving, even the murderer? How could I make sure that you have this contained cast list? And this idea just came to me that they're surrounded by this deadly fog. That's what it is. There's a deadly fog that surrounds the island. They can't get off because if they go into the fog, it kills them. And then immediately from that, it's, well, how many other people did it kill? And the voice in my head immediately was like, everybody. It killed everybody. That's the book you're writing. It's killed everyone else apart from these people on the island. And then the entire novel kind of unfurled from there. So when you're talking about world building, it becomes the mechanical thing of, I need to trap them on the island. There's a deadly fog. Where did the fog come from? Who created it? Why does that exist? What is life like now that we're just living on this island and we can't go anywhere else? So it's funny because it feels like a very small answer to a very big question, if that makes sense. It's just kind of like I mechanically needed something to do a job, and then it really got out of hand.
But it did get, I was going to say, it did get out of hand because there is the island and there is the fog, but then there's the rest of the world. And so there was, what happened to the rest of the world is also relevant.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that, again, if you're trying to cross genres, the trick of it, I think sometimes, is working out how much of each element you want to put in. If you're going to mix it with a little bit of science fiction, how much science fiction do you want to put into the book, right? Before, and how much can you put in before it becomes a science fiction book first and a crime book second? I always want mine to be crime books. That's really important to me. So I had to have the world decimated, and I didn't want this to become a Planet of the Apes thing where they get past the fog and all of a sudden, blah, whatever happens, happens. So I was constantly aware of that balance. I wanted to tip my hat to the future and technologies and sort of what that world had become without ever delving too deeply into it. Because I knew that the moment I did that, I would get carried away and it would become a science fiction book. So there's all these little winks to it. There's all these little hints of what the world used to be before it was lost. But hopefully we never get too deep in the weeds with that one.
And there are some people on the island who know precisely what the world was.
Yeah, and they were, because I did want to talk about that element of it. I did want the science fiction things coming through, the technology that we'll have in the near future, the sort of advancements that we're going to make. And I also wanted the contrast between our lovely island full of selfless kind people and, quite frankly, us, like who we are right now, what our society looks like. Like there's a big thing in the book about how we treat murder as entertainment, how we're not fazed by it, even though we could theoretically all walk out into a street and be killed. And this is shocking and terrible to them. They obviously can't understand this at all because they've never thrown a punch, let alone had to worry about violence or murder. And I use these characters. There's these three characters who are from the old world. They survived the apocalypse. They're 100 and something years old by this point, thanks to the technology in their systems. Everybody else was born on the island after the apocalypse. So you get this like nice meeting of viewpoints, this nice meeting of these quite brutal, sort of older human beings who are just like, they've seen things and they're a bit more cynical and a bit more jaded and they're used to violence. And the lovely pure souls who followed after, who are like, oh, the world is all roses and rainbows and everything's lovely.
It's so much fun to read. If you just joined us, we're talking about The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton, which comes out next Tuesday, but you can pre-order it right now. Not right now, but wait till after the show is over. But then please do this. You will absolutely love this. I was so taken by when you said the voice in your head said that there was a fog. And I thought, my voice in my head does not say that. But speaking of voices in your head, I will tell you that I did not read about this book until I picked it up. I read it just cold. And there is a narrative voice, a point of view. There's the thing that happens in this book that was so surprising to me. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, the what? And I don't know how exactly much you want to talk about it, but can you get there somehow to explain to the group what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because there is I simultaneously want to put up a spoiler warning while equally saying it's all part of the marketing. So if you see any marketing for this book, it's right there in the middle of it. And as you well know, Hank, this is not a conversation we really get to have with our publisher. They're like, that's interesting, that's going on the back of the book. And I'm like, but that was a surprise. Like I built that up to be quite a huge reveal, and they're like, well, there's other reveals. This is the best one. So yeah, so the narrative voice is an omniscient narrator. As I said, it's in the head of everyone on the island. It hears all their thoughts. It's talking to them all the time. They can talk to it, and it takes on a different persona for everybody. So for some, it's a best friend. For some, it's the It's, you know, it's a motherly or a fatherly figure. It's always slightly different, but it's always guiding them. It's telling them to be kind. It's telling them to be the best versions of themselves. So it's a quite nice thing, but it's also quite authoritarian. It's, you know, it's telling them what the rules are and making sure they obey them. How much more can I say about it? It's withholding information. We should say that it knows what happened this night. It knows who died and why that happened, and it doesn't want to tell our readers. So that's quite a big deal, why it's withholding that information when it never has before. But yeah, I think basically I would say to people watching this, I always please urge you, if you want to read one of my books, please don't even read the blurb on the back, because my spoilers start on page 1. That's just the way I operate. So don't read the blurb, go in blind. Hopefully you'll have a great time. But if you do look at some marketing, there is always a few spoilers in there, and this will be one of them. The narrative voice will be one of them.
I went in cold, and it was, I mean, you got your wish in that, because I just gasped. And then writer me thought, can you do that? You know, is that fair? And then envious author me thought, wow, I wish I would have thought of that. That's so perfect, because it's almost like, you know, it's like Jiminy Cricket. It's like a conscience. It's like a conscience or a consciousness, because we do have voices in our head. We all have voices in our head, some of which are lovely and some of which are ugly. And you kind of tapped into that.
Thank you so much. It's interesting you talked about that author you and reader you, because I have that as well. I have exactly that same distinction in my head between, I have to turn off author me when I'm engaging reader me, because author me wants to edit that book that I'm reading. Author me wants to think about how I would have done it. So it was author me, obviously, who came up with the narrative voice. And all the way through it, reader me was like, you need to change that a little bit, because at this point it's not entertaining, or you need to be changing that a little bit because at this point that's quite a cold presence in the novel and it's going to put people off. So it's this constant dialogue. And also it was I set that up, that omniscient narrator, because I love the challenge of it. How do you write a murder mystery with a bunch of people who don't know anything about violence? How do you write a murder mystery when they have a voice in their head that knows all their thoughts and all their desires? How do you plot that? How do you get to a conclusion that's narratively satisfying? So that was author me. Author me really wanted to do that and set out, and that was probably the biggest challenge of the novel. That and Finding Emery was making sure that worked, and worked as a character as well as a narrative device. So yeah, it's interesting. I love hearing that you've got that as well, because I thought I was the only person who's like schizophrenic that way.
Yeah, okay, I'll embrace that. But I do think that author voice, I mean, the author voice in our head is sort of the author me voice in our head is also sort of the editor and sort of the person who cares about what your readers think and the experience that your readers have in the novel. So just suffice it to say, it is really, really fun. And it's really, really, you know what it is, Stuart, though? It's also really fair. And I think that was a fine line that you walk when you talk about, is it a murder mystery? Is it science fiction? Is it fantasy? Because if you go too far into fantasy science fiction, then you can just make stuff up and then it's easy to get out of it. Like, oh, well, that rule doesn't work anymore. Ha ha, I forgot to tell you. So you've managed to make a realistic feeling world where people have agency and intent, and some of them have questions. I mean, I'm sorry for this long question, but you have taken this small place and used it as a microcosm for some really big life and death ideas. What does it mean to be part of a community? What does power mean? What does violence mean? Why do people do what they do? I mean, that's all in this book.
Yeah, and I think I'm very lucky because I get to paint on broad canvases. So I'm always, when my novels do cross genres, I get to cherry pick bits from everything. So I want to write a bit about horror, a little bit of sci-fi. It just means that I've got their entire canvas to paint across. And I really want to get to the edges of it. And I'm bothered by things. All novelists are. Like, often a book is us trying to work something out. It's the core of it will be something that we are concerned with. And we're trying to get an answer. We're just trying to worm an answer out of something. Everything that's in this book about humanity, about its future, about where we're going, about what that looks like. Can we prevent it? Should we prevent it? Do we need to change? that's the conversations in the ether around us. That's the conversation everyone in my groups is having. It's the one everyone's suddenly worried about daft things like we never used to be worried about, like money, the economy. Everybody knows everything about the economy these days, like because there's a natural sense that something is happening in our future, something's coming towards us that we're all very worried about. And this book is me just trying to exercise those demons for myself. So yeah, huge themes, because sci-fi gives you that lens to work with. Crime gives you a lens to talk about crime, punishment, redemption, what we owe to society, what society owes to us. Science fiction gives you a lens to look at future themes about what this society could become if we let it. What can it grow into? How do we arrest that development? How do we shape it? So yeah, if I get the opportunity to do that, I will always take it, because I only get to write this book once. And if I look back on it and think I missed the opportunity to write the hell out of it, I'd be so disappointed in myself. I'd be straight back on my publisher asking them to pulp it all so I could do a second version of it.
Well, you won't have to do that. You won't have to do that with The Last Murder at the End of the World. I mean, what we get from all of those genres, though, is power and guilt and violence and loyalty and justice, all of those kinds of things. And people who think they're doing something for the right reason.
I mean, that is I love those characters. Like, I love what I want when I write my books. What I'm trying to do is I never want red herrings. I never want things that the investigator can trip over, right? Because I think they're artificial. I think that is, again, the author turning in to pull some strings, and it feels very crafted. It feels very sort of untrue, unfair. What I want instead is characters with real motivations, who have goals, who have secrets, who have things that they want to get to. And the investigator's tripping over those mysteries first before they get to the central mystery they're trying to solve, right? So I need all these characters to feel lived in and feel real and feel like if I push the book upon them, they could carry the book for themselves. And that's my acid test for all these characters. If I took them out of this and put them into another book, would they still be interesting? And if they are, I keep them. And if they're not, I get rid of them. So they have to serve that narrative purpose. They have to have an entire inner life that means something to the investigator and gets in the investigator's way. They need to be an obstacle of some sort as well as a character. And you can't do that unless they are interesting, because the reader will not want to go anywhere near them. They won't want to spend any time with them. So even if you hate them, that is miles better to me than you thinking, oh, that's just a cog in this machine. That's all it's there for.
I mean, you have quite an ensemble cast of characters, with Emery as essentially the detective, and then a whole power structure and a lot of suspects. How do you juggle all those people?
You know what it's like. This is one of those things. Like, if you're an author, that ability to hold your plot in your head and hold all your characters in your head, you know them. It's like your friends. Like, you spend so much time with them. You're in their head. It is like you asking me, hey, Stu, how do you manage to keep all of your friends? How do you not mix up like Jamie and Steve? It's like, they're just two different people to me. They are entirely separate entities. I know them inside and out. And that's the way I feel about my characters. For me, they are so distinct, and they are so, I don't know, they're so people, they're so real. Like, I almost feel like I could turn around and talk to them. So that for me is never an issue. The bit for me that is an issue, actually, the thing I often get lost in, is trying to work out and trying to remember what is actually happening versus what my investigator thinks is happening. So I always have that struggle, like especially around, like, you get to page 75 or 78 when they're starting to piece together, and it's constantly, I need a big Excel spreadsheet of like, this is what they think is happening currently, and this is what's actually happening currently.
You actually have an Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, I have to, because I really get lost in that. So chapter 1, chapter 2, there's just 2 columns: what they think is happening, what's actually happening. And then that's how I keep track. Because otherwise I would very much have the investigator knowing what's actually happening too soon. You know what I mean? Or not making the necessary logical steps to get to the next stage.
Yes, that sort of leap where they make a decision based on nothing except that you, the author, told them.
Yes.
Do you make that spreadsheet first, or as you go?
No, so it's really interesting, and I don't know what your process is, but I'd love to find out. But I spend 3 months planning my novels, and then once I've got that plan in place, I start writing. And then I like to give myself leeway, because what will inevitably happen is the thing that I plan doesn't work as well on the page. Or when I start writing it, I realize that it's not, I've got too much exposition, too many expositional scenes, I need a bit of action, or so I'll move things around, I'll bring things in. Sometimes things will go out and the plan will start changing and morphing in front of me, and it'll start to get a bit looser, and then I've got to tighten it up a little bit. So that spreadsheet of what's happening versus what they think is happening, that gets edited as I'm going along, because it's constantly shifting in front of me. Because again, it's a dance with the reader. I'm always trying to think, what does the reader think is happening now? I assume that every one of my readers is the smartest of crime readers, that they know this genre inside and out, they know the tropes inside and out, and that they're looking at the book and they're like, I recognize that trope. Here's what I think is going to happen next. And then I try to go the other way. I try to go underneath it, above it. I try to turn the other way. I'm always trying to have this dance with them. So the spreadsheets and the planning's all part of that. Like, I want this to feel, I just want them to know that they are thought about while this is happening.
Oh, I so agree with you about that, because you write, I mean, I don't have anything like that. I just go with it and see what happens, and just see what someone wants and what they'll do to get it. And on, all the parallel characters, actors have their own desires. And when the desires clash together, then something happens. It may not be the best way of doing it, but it is how I do it. And so far, knock on wood, seems to work. But I do think that the dance with the reader is so interesting, because I'm very present. London says, I love it when I can't figure out a book fast. And that's right. I mean, that's what you're saying, is that I want to be able to, at the end, think, oh, I should have seen that coming, but I didn't.
Yeah.
That it's delightful and surprising, but fair. That's top of mind for you.
Yeah, because again, we've got to this point, I think, where we're almost supposed to have a twist. There has to be a twist, and there shouldn't have to be a twist. That's insane. Like, every book does not need to have a twist in it. But if you're going to do a twist, you better damn well obey the rules of twists, right? Which is that the reader should see it and then immediately wonder why they didn't see it. They should get to it and be like, why didn't I? It was all there. And their first thought should be, it was all there. Their first thought was, that didn't come out of nowhere. That's not a man with a gun walking in a door who I've never met before. That is something that he laid out very carefully right in front of me, and he was very honest with it. And when it came, I just wasn't quick enough to catch it. And if you do that, that is the greatest pleasure in writing. I genuinely believe that. That is the most delicious dessert you will ever eat. It's the best meal you'll ever have. It's the greatest conversation you'll ever have. It is when you do that in a book and you get that moment, you're like, oh, yes, yes.
And even if you read the book again, knowing it, it's still good, because then you see all the groundwork that was laid, all the puzzle pieces that were laid, all the pointers that were there that you totally missed, which is even fun to see as well. I always think that when publicists, again, say, oh, wait for the big twist, I'm like, don't say wait for the big twist, because I'm reading thinking, is this it? Is this it? So, but I think a twist is more like a reveal. It's something that was there, and the reveal says, here's what you looked at the wrong way. Here's what you thought it meant X, but it means Y, and that's really fun. We're running out of time, and I have about 10,000 more questions about this marvelous book, The Last Murder at the End of the World, which you all must read. But I have make 2 more questions, and then we'll go to the audience questions. And one lucky questioner will win a copy of The Last Murder at the End of the World. So you want that to be you. A couple questions is, what are you like when you're writing? Do you go into your office and you're just so happy every day to be able to write this novel, or are you slitting your throat and thinking, oh, please, I should have been something else?
Yeah, I mean, my name is Stuart Turton. That is the name that should appear on the side of a van that turns up to fix your plumbing. It's an ideal sort of gardener's name. Like, it has that sort of, like, you'd look at that and you'd be like, that guy's going to do a good job. So, like, I'd turn up as an author. It's a bit different. So, but I love being outdoors. I love people. I used to be a journalist for years. I like people. I like talking to people and asking questions and having things answered. So for me to sit down at a computer for 8 hours a day is the very antithesis of what I want to be doing with my day. I find it really, really hard. I find it really tedious most days, because most of it's already in my head. I know what that is that I'm going to be doing that day. I'm just trying to sort of rip it out and put it on the page. And it's not a very pleasant process, but I love having a book, if that makes sense. So I hate the process of writing, but I love the book when it exists and when it's there. And I'm like, I can judge what I thought it would be and the potential of it versus what I actually achieved and how much of it I got on there and how successful I was in my goals for it. And I love when readers come to me and they have read it and then they have opinions on it and they thought one way or another way about it. And, you know, you must have this as well. Like, people will come up to you and they've like drawn pictures out of it, or it's inspired. They've said, like, I had nightmares after it, and you did that to another human being. That's astonishing to me, that you can fire their imagination like this, or you can make them have a sleepless night just because you sat down and wrote some words. That is a superpower. That is magical. So I love that bit. It's just the entire 2 years that precedes it that is slightly heartbreaking for me.
Out and wishing you were a plumber. Yeah. I mean, but when you create someone like Emery, and we love her, and I say to you, I love her, that she, what a great character. And you can think I made her up. You know, she came from me, and that is quite lovely. And I have one last question, and I hope it's not, I don't think it's giving anything away. It isn't. It totally is not. But are you as optimistic a person as you seem like in this novel? Do you have, I mean, if I say to you, do you have hope for mankind? That seems like such a dumb question, but that's how you feel. How I felt at the end of this is that I have been through a journey, and there is hope and goodness.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't understand the evolutionary purpose of cynicism. Like, I don't get how it serves us. I don't think how that helps anybody. I've never met a cynic who's truly a cynic at their core and thought they're having a good time. I've never thought that, like, whatever you think is coming tomorrow, you might as well try and enjoy today. And my optimism is that I used to be a travel journalist. I've been all over the world. I've talked to obviously thousands of people, and the majority of people I've met have been lovely. They've been beautiful. They've been kind. And we all want the same things. We want to protect our children. We want a happy, fulfilling lives. And we just want to do our best. That's nearly what everybody wants. So there's this core, I think, to humanity that is the best thing ever, that is the most wonderful thing ever. And I think there's a lunatic fringe that surrounds it. And there will always be, because we've got bits of our personality that we're not proud of, that are deep inside us, like urges and desires and things that, you know, sometimes guide us astray. But fundamentally, I think we're good. And fundamentally, I think we can be wonderful. And I think we're maybe getting to a crossroads where we're going to have to make a decision as a species, a decision as a people. What kind of people do we want to be for the next 1,000 years? Where do we want to go? What do we want this universe to look like? And do we want to shape it? And I think we will have that conversation. I genuinely do. And I think we will do something marvelous.
You see, you all, why you have to read this. And what Stuart just said is this book is sort of a guidebook for that conversation. So if you're going to have that conversation or think about those kinds of things, please read this as well, and it will help you with that thought process. I just love this book, Stuart. So thank you for it. Thank you for it. Let's take some questions from the audience. Renee says, this is a good question, Renee. Did you learn anything new about yourself by writing this book?
Yeah, I do. I'm always surprised by some of the conclusions I come to in my writing, because as I said earlier, I'm often writing trying to figure things out. So my first novel, The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, I was really bothered by crime and redemption and whether we can be redeemed for awful things and how awful the thing would have to be that we couldn't be redeemed for. And I was surprised to find out that my tolerance for that is pretty high. I think that, like, we should allow ourselves to be redeemed. And while I was writing Last Murder, what really came out of it, as you said, as I started reading, the world's been destroyed. Why has the world been destroyed? I think it's probably this. I used to be a technology journalist for a few years, and I started pulling in technology and things that I'd read about and things I'd interviewed people about where we're going and where the world's going. And I was surprised when I started writing about the destruction of the world that I thought it was entirely, like, it's a sci-fi, so it could have done anything. It could have been an alien invasion. It could have been, you know, new plant life, but it wasn't. It was mankind. It was mankind destroying each other. And then discovering that out of that, I thought from the ashes, something wonderful would arise. That out of that, we we could be better. I was surprised by that conclusion. I was surprised because I know I'm an optimist, but that is radical optimism. That really is, that we're not going to do, it's not going to be like The Road by Cormac McCarthy. You know, we're not going to be eating babies. Like, we can be better, that there is a way out of this. So yeah, I was pleased by that, to find that, like, under the duress of plotting and deadlines, I still came up with something that would be harder to write than a typical dystopia, but more filled with joy.
Yes, and you have succeeded. Great question, Renee. Katie says, how did you come up with character names? Good question. Because they're so cusp, you know, they're familiar but not, or kind of familiar but not.
Yeah, these are all great questions. Congratulations, everybody. It's a brilliant, beautiful audience. The names, I'm so glad you picked up on that, because I was thinking about this society, the world has ended, but it's still set at the point the world ends. It's still set about 100 years in our future, is the idea. And then the world ends and we lose all that technology. So it feels very familiar, if not even a little backwards from where we are now. And I was thinking, in 100 years, the world will carry on being a melting pot. People will still be coming from here to there and settling there and here. So the names will start to change. You already see it in our society. Our names are starting to change a little bit. There's loads of influences from all different kinds of places. So I was trying to think about what those names would look like. So you couldn't have, like, I found it really hard to sort of like have this novel that was set 100 years dystopian, then just have John and Adam and Peter walking around. Didn't feel quite right. So I tried to, like, look for names from all different continents and all different places, like North Africa, the Middle East, China, Europe, North America. I tried to get those names, and then I started gently altering the spellings of a lot of them. So you get names that do, like Emery is a name that feels very specific, feels very familiar, but there's none of them out in the world. I've changed the spelling of that name. It's a North African name. Neem is another one. I've changed the spelling of that name. So yeah, that was constantly the process of just having names that felt familiar, slightly different spellings from a lot of different continents.
It's very atmospheric. It takes you there, those names. It shows you that you're here, but it's not quite the here that we're used to. We have time for one more question. I know there are a million more. Have you experienced writer blocks, says Emily? And if so, what would you do?
I have not, because one of the great things about starting as a print journalist is that you are paid for your words. So no print journalist has writer's block, because we don't get paid if we have writer's block. It's a very surefire way of getting rid of that problem, is making sure that you need to pay your rent and therefore you need to write words. The only thing I've ever found is I don't write well sometimes, and everyone will have this. Every writer, I'm sure Hank's been through it. You sit down at your computer, you had a great day yesterday, and then today you cannot write for toffee, and you don't know why. You just cannot express yourself. It's bad. You've had a good night's sleep. You've ate well. You don't know what the problem is. It just happens. And the only thing you can do is keep writing. You just got to write through it. And writer's block is the same. I think writer's block for writers sometimes is a sense that they're writing garbage and they're bothered by it. That's not the problem. Just keep writing your garbage. You can always fix it tomorrow, but you need to write.
I think about that. Sometimes I have a great day. The next day I'll think, this is the worst sentence. And I think, yes, it is. Just write another bad sentence, because you can fix it later. I know I've been a television reporter for more than 40 years. And if I walked into the newsroom and said, can I be on the 6 o'clock news at like 10 after? Because I'm not feeling it right now. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? I would not be, you just do the best you can every day. And some days it's bad and some days it's good, and you'll just fix the whole thing later. We have so many more questions and we just don't have time, you all. I'm so sorry. It is giveaway time. That is right, Chuck, in the back room. We're going to give away, well, we're not, Stuart is, and the fabulous Source Books is going to give away a copy of The Last Murder at the End of the World to one lucky commenter. So let's spin the wheel of fun and see what happens. This is always such an exciting moment. And I think we should have music, but I'm not sure why we don't. I know one of our producers tried to have music once and it just didn't work. And the winner is Margaret Pinard. Oh, Margaret works for Crime Time. But do you think we should let Margaret win? I mean, I have to tell you, Margaret is an author in her own right, and she will love this book. She will absolutely love this book. So if you all don't mind, I think we should let Margaret win. And I'm very pleased to let her. I mean, she's fabulous and she will love this. So Stuart, you have an instant new fan in Margaret.
Yay!
And you should know her. So Margaret, you know where to find me, and we will get you your book. Stuart, congratulations on Pub Day next week. I wish you all the best with this.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. I've really loved our chat. It's been such fun to talk about all the little things we've talked about. I hope the readers enjoyed it as well.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. You're getting lots of applause and adulation in the comments. Let me hold on to you for one more second to say, you in the audience, do not move. Well, okay, you have 15 minutes to do what you will. Get some lemonade, get a cup of tea, get a latte, get another pillow, whatever you want, because in 15 minutes, look who is going to be here, Anthony Horowitz. Oh, he is right. Awesome in every way. A genius, brilliant. I told you this was the best crime time double feature that there's ever been, right? And here's the second half of the double feature, Close to Death, by the fabulous Anthony Horowitz. You will not want to miss this interview. I can't wait to talk with him. Stuart, you've been astonishing. Thank you so much. All of you, please look for The Last Murder at the End of the Worlds. Stuart, safe travels, bon voyage, happy pub day.
Thank you so much. I love this every minute. Thank you so much.
And we will talk to you all again. Remember, you all, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you at 15.